Hi there, it's Pastor Matthew of Rivers of Life Community Church. And this week we are continuing on from other weeks when we've been looking at the Gospel of Mark, and we are now in chapter 5, where this week we're going to be looking at the first 20 verses. It's about a demon-possessed man being healed of his demon possession. In the NIV version that I have, it reads like this. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an evil spirit came to the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him any more, not even with a chain. For he'd often been chained hand and foot, but tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Swear to God that you won't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the evil spirit came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there dressed in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged him to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you, and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. So let's take a dive into this extraordinary passage. But before we get into that, let's remember where we've got to. And remembering, even from just last week, the astonishing nature of who Jesus is, what he was doing, and whether it was to people, either through his teaching or his miracles. But last week were signs and wonders. And we remember that he said to the disciples, let's go to the other side of the lake. Jesus knew where he was going. And I almost wonder if he knew that there was someone there who he needed to talk to, someone whom he wanted to have an impact on because of what this person was going to be able to do. And this even builds upon the picture of sowing, and sowing in what kind of soil, and how long it takes that seed to grow, and what kind of harvest, and when you get that harvest, and who produces that harvest. Because this is what's going to happen. Jesus is going to encounter a demon-possessed man, and that demon-possessed man was going to have a considerable impact upon his country through the testimony of being set free by the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. The very same one who last week we found out last week was asleep in the back of a boat with his head on a pillow, fast asleep in the middle of a raging storm. And let's think about this. This is no passenger ship, no ocean liner for doing a cruise. This was a fairly small fishing boat, and even to the point where there were other boats to manage the number of people that were going across the lake. It wasn't one big boat. It was these were small-ish boats. Needless to say, whether they were small boats or big boats, they were certainly enough of a storm to put those seasoned sailors, because these were fishermen who would have known about these waters, they were scared witless, scared out of their mind to wake Jesus up. And what did he do? Completely calmed the mega storm. From a mega storm to a mega calm. That's what Jesus was able to do with a few simple words. They're simple words in themselves, but when they come out of a man with authority, come out by this power that Jesus has, and one way has given to us through the Holy Spirit, to speak calm and speak still, to see from chaos to calm, with, as I say, in the language themselves are simple words, but spoken with authority, they can have great power. And we see this week more great power. And it's no wonder that, because I do often believe that there was a touch of satanic adversary carrying on here, wanting to stop Jesus crossing this lake to do his next piece. On many levels, not only was he going to drive out one of part of Satan's crew, as it were, what part of his gang, because this is a demon-possessed man, an unclean spirit, but also what this man was also going to do in terms of grabbing more people out of the enemy's hands. Because what does Satan want to do? He wants to kill, steal, and destroy, and wants to keep people in the dark. So we come from a storm to an unclean spirit via the Galilee. And we've got there in verse 2 that this unclean spirit was found in the tombs. Tombs were considered to be dirty places. These were full of dead people, because it says there they were graves, as you pick up. So an unclean spirit in an unclean area. Ironically, this man in his normal mind would not have been living there, would not have decided to live in this particular area, whether he was religious or not, because it would be full of dead people, but it brought to him a certain degree of control over, or perhaps ease, if you like, in a dreaded situation. Because it's the thing we've got to remember here. There's an element of this. There's the thing to remember. There's a man here, or a person here, who was being demonically oppressed, and as it looks, you read through this, it looks like a degree of insanity, a mental illness that's going on here. But we know from the gospel reading here that this particular form of what looks like a mental illness was a demonic oppression. And even some of the things that he was able to do, places he was going, there was certainly a strength, a supernatural strength about this person, because as it reads in there, verse 4, that he had tore the chains. He was bound, but the people around him knew that they could not bind this person, because this dark, evil spirit, or spirits as we find out, were so strong, gave this man such supernatural, superhuman power, that they were able to break off those chains and those fetters that are holding him physically back. Superhuman demonic strength, describing a dark, tyrant, evil spirit. And as I say, this yes, has given him some superpower, but this man was this man was in a miserable state, and even by the way that it was described, that he couldn't be chained. He was probably stark naked. It says his there, he was cutting his cells, basically couldn't live with himself. He was at times almost way out of his mind. But as we read there, so this describes this person in terms of the actual how they would have physically looked, or on operating in dark, dirty, dead places in one way, if you like, because they're in the tombs. It paints quite a scene. Ironically, reading this out on Halloween, when people go out and love this sort of thing in one way, but in reality, in this man's situation, he was demonically oppressed, as you read through these scriptures. And there we see verse 6, and it's ironically because much of Halloween is done perhaps without having a clue who Jesus is, or certainly not recognizing, especially in the same way. Verse 6, this man, and I don't believe this man, he might have been given some kind of supernatural power, but this is demonic, to recognize who Jesus was. I don't think he would have had a mind to hear from round the borders, this Jesus bloke or something like that. But I just think the absolute majesty of Jesus spiritually, because just remember that Jesus was before the creation of the world, and would be part of the creative process of these very same demons. The stories about how they came demons is outside of the scope of his study, but these demons just basically knew who Jesus was, and as it says there, they ran and fell on the knees in front of him. They were to a degree worshipping him. Now, but the thing about it, though, they were doing this because they were expecting judgment. They were expecting expulsion from this man. And that in one way struck fear in these demons. And this is something we need to remember as Christians, that when there's in the power Jesus has, he's stronger, and he says in one way, because we talked about in other parts of the Gospels about being stronger than the strong man, and that's who Jesus is. His sheer presence, his sheer majesty is enough to spell fear in any demon. And as we see, the size of this demon or this demonic oppression, and it's ironically, so we're talking about this man being tormented. So here we've got the tormentor in front of Jesus, now expecting torment, because of where they knew where Jesus could send him, or where they expected to go, and it's the last thing they felt they needed, and it should remind us of a place that we would want to escape ourselves. And we've had an interesting example, scenario here that even though Jesus gave a command to go out, there was, as it says in verse 8, because he said, "Come out of him," but these demonic depressions wanted somehow to. They were basically pleading with Jesus, and wanting to work out, have almost a better scenario for themselves. But verse 9, it picks up. So this is the thing about this. It gives a bit of a characteristic, or a bit of a dimension, perhaps, to what this spirit was like. And we've been talking about the physical way in which this demon presented themselves in this man. But here we have what is the nature, what is actually behind this, because it says there in verse 9 that. Because Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" And they said, "My name is Legion." He replied, "For we are many." Now, that just shows you the enormity of the demonic oppression here. I mean, and the language used there was because it's just to say that when you think of a legion, you're talking about 6,000 fighting men plus. Probably more, or like on the horse or something like that. But the term was suggesting the size of the possession. Numerous demons, perhaps presenting many different powers, and basically opposed to Jesus, who embodies the power of God. The power of God in front of a huge horde of demons, and yet here they are. And this is the thing: no matter the size, no matter the power, Jesus strikes fear into Satan's kingdom, to the point they were trying to negotiate, because Jesus has the authority to send these demons to the pit, to the abyss, and that's where they were trying to negotiate with him not to go. They were desperate for no direct banishment to the abyss, but as we read on verse 11 and 12, they thought their way out were into the pigs that were seen on the hillside not so far away. We will read a little bit later, there were 2,000 of these pigs. Now, it's quite interesting. It says something about the area as well. That Jesus, and it says, see almost a bit of a transition in Jesus' ministry, because the fact there were pigs suggests that if this was a Jewish land, they were completely gone off the rails, because the pigs were completely banished from the Jewish diet. It's possibly more likely he was in Gentile territory. So not only had he gone to the tombs, an unclean place, and this is the thing, Jesus, I believe, had purposely set out on this journey, and he'd gone to go to this place, to this uncleanness, both in terms of this tombstone that has set this man free, but in terms of actually the heathen people, the outsiders. He's gone to these places to bring the good news elsewhere. But even within that, these were people who were dealing with pigs in one way, and it was probably part of their way of doing their religion, their idolatry. and things like that. But it didn't deter Jesus to bring the message to these people, the message of the good news. So the evil spirits were given permission to go into these pigs. So they were allowed, and you can imagine what's going on here. He was given, it says in verse 13, he gave them permission, and the evil spirits came out and went into the pigs. Now, so you got to think about this. Isn't only so there's 2,000 pigs as you can read on, but verse he heard the herd about 2,000 pigs in number. So from this demon-possessed man who couldn't be bound, was found in the tombs, the demons have gone out of this man into these pigs. 2,000 pigs. It's no wonder. And this is a man who was so beside himself, he was cutting himself and doing all sorts of just, oh man, you can only imagine went through that mind. This is now being transferred to the pigs, and therefore it's little wonder that in them they then rushed down the bank and went into the lake and were instantly drowned. And so there's a couple of things here. So it sent quite a message to the area. Pigs were considered to be unclean, yet the unclean spirits went into these unclean animals, and they were ended by being killed by the unclean spirits. So that in one way, because the spirits had nothing to possess, they probably went into banishment anyway, into the abyss. But in one way, Jesus was pointing to a picture of cleaning up this land away from the idolatry. Now, okay, today we can eat pigs, but this is not first century Israel or the first century Middle East. This obviously would have created quite a picture, and especially for those tending the pigs. They probably disbelief, disbelief of first of all seeing this man and these pigs, and yeah, you can only imagine how it would have struck them what was going on here. Startled, for want of a better phrase, to the point no wonder they wanted to go and tell someone about it. They wanted to go around the country, around the townsfolk, especially those who owned the pigs, and say, tell them what's going on. Say your pigs are no more, and that lunatic, what a difference. And so they went and then found and said who did it. And so they, the townsfolk, the country people, went and found Jesus, and they basically couldn't cope. I think they just couldn't cope with Jesus, the power, the enormity. They knew what this man was like. They were told about the story about the pigs. It summed up to someone. It actually at this point reminds me of Peter when the big huge haul of fish come out, and he said to Jesus, "Don't go away from me. I'm an unclean man. I can't do this." And this is probably what they were like. The cleansing, the holiness of Jesus at that point, the majesty, the magnificence of Jesus was such they couldn't cope with him, and couldn't deal with him at that point. And in one way, it's a degree of perhaps clemency at that point, because he did do as he asked, and that's the thing. From Jesus' point of view, you could think it was disappointing. You're thinking, what kind of rubbish harvest is this? But that doesn't tell the whole story, does it? Because we have this man, as it says there in verse 15, because they'd seen him sitting there dressed. So let's read this. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons, and he was sitting there dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Little surprise. Afraid, clothed decently, stark raving out of his mind man, completely healed, and their pig's gone. Couldn't cope with the cleansing that's gone down there. And so, yes, verse 16, once the townfolk heard of the story, they could not cope and asked Jesus to leave. As it says there in verse 17, pleaded with Jesus to leave their region. But thankfully, that's not the whole story, because we have quite a result here. So it says, because we can read this in verses through 18 through to 20. And we've been talking, as I say, I've often been alluding back to the sowing and reaping principle. So Jesus' harvest and the early preaching of the gospel to new territories started with this man who'd been healed. This such a profound impact would have this cleansing of a man made upon this man, that you would not have been able to hold this man back in terms of him sharing his story, sharing his version of the good news. It's not a different version, but he had experienced the power of Jesus. He had experienced the power of the good news, the power of the gospel to save, to set free. It doesn't matter what had happened, he was set free, and he wanted to tell people about it. It's almost like saying, you try and hold me back from saying this. It's almost like I'd rather die than not bring this message out, because there's so much within him. He couldn't do anything else perhaps but to share this message of the good news of him being set free. And as I say, this is probably a very sinful Gentile area, clean, sensed by the pigs. But we now have an evangelist who's not only been part of the cleansing because of getting rid of these dirty pigs. Remembering this is first century AD Middle East, and with a huge, enormous message to bring. So we see here, and I believe there's a purposefulness to set free a man having crossed boundaries from one side of the Galilee to the other, to bring a harvest in a new field, and at a certain rate and a certain timing. He wouldn't necessarily, because you will be able to read on the impact that Jesus had in that area through this man, I believe, through his preaching of what he done, bring about an eventual harvest, because I imagine that the message would have rung in that man, because anyone knew who this man was, would have seen the change, and eventually would be able to receive the message for themselves, I believe, and have their own reception, as it were, of the good news. And that may be for you. Maybe you are afraid of the cleanness, perhaps, that Jesus can bring, perhaps, or the cleansing that you've seen, perhaps. But I would counsel you not to give up, to hang on in there, because I do think that some of those people sent away probably did get the message and did receive the message of this evangelist. And that's the most important thing, because of the fact that if you don't want to end up being like one of these pigs or one of these demons, then receive life from Jesus, be set free, be completely, you can be completely changed like this man can be by the power of Jesus' words, by the power that Jesus brings. We've been reading this over the weeks. The power of Jesus' words, just to preach it, just to cast, to bring healing, and to cast out demonic oppression. That's the power of Jesus, and I believe that power of Jesus is here today, in this time, in this day and age. It doesn't matter what part of the world you're on. I believe He has the power today to set people free. And I pray that if anyone is listening to this message and wants the same, call out to Jesus, that his words will drop into your heart to see yourself set free, be brought into freedom, be brought into the good news, and to be brought into a right relationship with him, because that's what Jesus can do. How do we know? Because the power of his blood is there to set us free from all sin and all impurity, bring us into a right relationship with God the Father through Jesus' blood and sacrifice. So I pray that you will receive that message. It will produce fruit, and if you want to know more about this, perhaps you can read on in these Gospels, or you can contact me through the contacts page. Listen to this message again, but bring about your own prayers, saying, Jesus, reveal yourself to me. Set me free from my sin. Set me free from my demonic oppression. Show me the people that can help me, where I can get help. Because it could be me, it could be others. You may be living in a locality where you can get to a church that Jesus wants to show you to get more help, because you may not be physically in Ashford. But if I can help in any way, do use the contact details in the description box. We do have a Facebook page. We do have a web page, as you'll see from the contacts page itself, to know about more of the ministry of Rivers of Life Community Church. But I just simply pray that the good news will come to your heart. And if you've been wavering, I pray it will come to you afresh to put you in right relationship with Jesus, and bring about a new level of freedom, as it were. Because Jesus will cross those boundaries to set you free. And I pray that you will believe that and will find that freedom. In the meantime, be blessed and walk in your freedom and in the power of grace and in his righteousness. Amen.